You've written a chapter about COVID in Australia and followed the COVID situation very closely. Looking back, if we can indeed look back now, how would you describe the pandemic? What did we do right and wrong? How horrific would it have been without vaccines?
Thank you, Merin. This is a question about COVID, and COVID is one topic that I'm very passionate about. Let me answer your question. Let me say a few things first about looking back, how I would describe the pandemic. Did we do it right? Did we do it wrong? And what role did the vaccines play in this whole business? The way I look at it is I would call the world BC and AC, before COVID and after COVID. We have not seen any disease like this at this scale that spread so quickly across the globe. And in a sense, it has fundamentally changed our lives. We can study how many people have died by looking at excess deaths, for example. And that's your standard actuarial method of studying the impact, and from that we can actually work out what the impact of the vaccines have been. And it shows that the vaccines have been very, very important. But what I want to talk about is the kinds of things that this particular problem has actually produced. Namely, it has produced a huge boost for research on genetic material. Let me try here and talk about the cost of analyzing genome sequence. So you take an individual and write down all the ATCGs in that person's each strand of DNA. So this is what we are looking at, the cost of doing that. And the vertical scale is a log scale. And therefore, if the vertical scale is a straight line, it would follow the Moore's law. But what you see here is it was plodding along nicely to conform to the Moore's law until about 2007, and then the cost dropped dramatically. How far did it drop? Let me explain. The cost of genetic analysis of your fundamental genome started in 2001. It cost $95 million. 20 years later, to do exactly the same, it cost $500. And just last month or 2 months ago, a research paper was published that showed that the cost has gone down to $100. So you can see the scale of reduction in cost. The other thing that this picture, that things I have written down does not show is how much time it takes to do this analysis. Back in 2001, it took 3 months to do analysis of one single person's genome. Now it takes a few hours. So few hours we can figure out what the entire genome sequence of one person is. What does that mean? That means now you can have huge patterns available to you through the data stacks of the individual genome. What does that mean? That means more jobs for you. You can become that data scientist to analyze these genomes in double quick time. And that's where the whole business of quickly analyzing data, quickly analyzing huge amount of data comes into play. Because here we are talking about one person's genome worth about 100 gigabytes worth of data. And that's a pretty huge number. So you want to analyze that in quick order and figure out what is genetically wrong with that person. And that is where you have a huge opportunity for the future.